You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host today, Nicholas Kendell, and joining me for a special treat is my good friend, coworker, co-host, the man, the myth, the legend of the Dove Valley Deep Divers, and resident genius, Eric. I can see you edited this. Erick Trickel. Eric, how you doing?
Doing good, man. I'm glad to be on. Glad to get a break from Lance, man. No, not really. I'm actually glad to be on. Glad to be talking more football. And it actually seems like a long time since, outside of like just quick chats, that you and I have actually sat down and really just talked football.
It has been too long. I definitely agree with you there. But, unfortunately, we are meeting under the circumstances of an 0-2 team. But, neither of us are that surprised. We talked about it was always going to be a transition season. And there are things that they're building upon as well. So, it's not all doom and gloom. But we want to make sure that you guys can find us on Twitter at Erick Trickel, that's Trickel, and at Nick Kendell, MHH. You can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you to subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input on our show. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you're heading over to Mile High Huddle, a new affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. This show is powered by Overtime Media.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, Eric. Well, we are full speed ahead. The Broncos are 0-2, coming off a kick to the groin, I guess is the way to put it, with that loss to the Bears. The high emotions of the win, it felt like a win with the Emmanuel Sanders touchdown catch in the corner. Great play by him. Good job by the offense to drive it down there. The 2-point conversion, only to choke it away at the end. Refs be damned. The roughing the passer, etc. That stuff's going to happen. Over the long haul, that stuff kind of tends to even out. So, just curious. We haven't really talked about it so much. What were your thoughts of the game in general?
It was a sloppy game from both sides offensively. It was just, I don't know, it got kind of boring there towards the end a little bit. And then obviously we had that exciting drive that ended in a Joe Flacco interception. And then we had the defense stepped up, got the ball back to the offense quickly, and we had another exciting drive that ended in that touchdown. And I remember jumping up and yelling, and my daughter just stands up and just looks at me like, "What the heck are you doing, Dad?" But I was very excited. It finally got me back into the game because I was half tempted to turn it off. And then just watching back, and the penalty and then the field goal, the whole thing about the timeout, it all sucks. But the fact of the matter is the Broncos gave up a 25-yard pass to a guy that they just let get wide open. Like, it sucks. It falls on them.
Yep, it does. Should have played better earlier. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. If it's in butts were candy nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. You know how it goes. So now it's time to turn our focus ahead. This is the Scouts Eye preview episode. The Green Bay Packers, and goodness, I know that first game against the Bears was sloppy, and that game against the Vikings was kind of just one. I don't know how to put it. The Packers got off to a quick start. They totally controlled the flow of the game. Kirk Cousins was unbelievably inept. And the Packers' offense started to get it going, but some of the quick offensive stuff so far, or statistical stuff, their offense has not been great so far. Bears and Vikings arguably have two of the top 10 defenses in football, so not a shock there, but 15.5 points per game, 274 yards per game, which is pretty darn low, 178.5 passing yards per game, and 95.5 rushing yards per game. So their rushing now offense has actually been a little bit better, but 19th ranked. That's, not great. The defense, though, it's the defensive statistics that are very interesting, and typically I like to go over the DVOA stuff from Football Outsiders, but considering it's a 2-week sample size, that stuff doesn't really normalize yet, but so take everything with a grain of salt. It's really depending on who you've played so far this season. I mean, the 49ers are 2-0, but they beat the Jags and the Bengals, so that stuff's going to normalize a bit over time. Still, hot start for the Packers defense. Pettin is a hell of a defensive mind, and they've really made some efforts to add defensive talent there. Surrendering 9.5 points per game, second in the NFL. 337 yards per game total, 13th in the NFL. 215 passing yards per game, 11th in the NFL. And 122 rushing yards per game, 19th in the NFL. And the big stat that really stands out for me here is that they have a +3 turnover ratio on the season. So protecting the football, taking it away. This Packers defense is flying around. There's just no other way to put it. They have some talent on there. I mean, they signed Preston Smith in the offseason, Zadarius Smith in the offseason. They lost Mike Daniels, but they brought in Rashawn Gary. Their secondary is looking pretty good, although I don't know if you saw the injury report for the Packers, but they are incredibly dinged up. Some individual stats: Aaron Rodgers, 412 yards on the season. Aaron Jones, 155 rushing yards. Devontae Adams, 142 receiving yards. Blake Martinez, I think he had like 12 tackles in that Vikings game, but up to 20 on the year. And Preston Smith had that impressive interception to start off pretty early in that Bears-Packers game. So any thoughts on how they've looked so far this season? I know, again, Vikings and Bears, we do have a common opponent to go after it, and the Bears at home really took it to the Vikings. But just early thoughts on the statistical performance and just the early showing of these new 2019 Green Bay Packers under Matt LaFleur.
I really like what I've seen. I mean, it's always going to be some issues when you're implementing a new scheme, which for the Packers is so different from what they were running a year ago. They really are learning a completely new scheme. A lot of concepts that they weren't running, just a lot of new stuff that they're running, and they're still working out the kinks. But despite that, they've had flashes of brilliance. We've seen Matt LaFleur and his offense just thrive at times this season, and then they've hit some road bumps just from, again, just getting those kinks out, things that they don't know. We're seeing a lot of stuff that we're with the Packers offense that we see the 49ers and the Rams do and do very well, and it's translating to the Packers game. And of course, having Aaron Rodgers always helps your offense. Having two of the best tackles in the NFL always helps as well. But as you had hinted at and said, actually, is that defense is what is more surprising to me. The pieces that they've added have been right in the key areas that they needed to add at. And they still have some weaknesses, which we'll get to here in a little bit, but it's just there's not many ways to really attack this Packers defense. And for an offense that's struggling like the Broncos, that's going to be scary.
Yeah, indeed. And just really want to hammer home that defensive turnaround for them. Last year, according to DVOA, the 2018 stats, again from Football Outsiders, is probably my favorite statistical database as far as advanced stats go. And no subscription required, which is always nice. But they had the 7th overall rated offense, good. Not surprising for Aaron Rodgers. They had the 29th overall rated defense. And the 29th rated overall special team. So that might be an area to attack. But the defense, early on, they are looking really good. And again, the Vikings offense, outside their wide receivers, aren't really world beaters. Running game has looked better, but the pass game is just, Kirk Cousins can only take you so far, it seems. And the Bears, we got to see them. That's not a great offensive team. So Allen Robinson gave them a pretty good contest there. He was making some plays against the Packers secondary. So it's a pretty darn good team. They are off to a 2-0 start. And the crazy thing, as you hinted at, a great point, is that they are still implementing the scheme. Aaron Rodgers didn't play any preseason, which I have no issue with, but that's going to put you a little bit behind the 8 ball. And it feels like they're starting to catch their groove. So this Packers team, I'm pretty darn, relieved would be the word, is that the Broncos are catching them week 3 rather than, say, week 12 in Lambeau. Not only for the weather's sake, but I think by week 12, if they can stay healthy, obviously you never know, that's the name of the game. But once they're really starting to feeling better and starting to feel themselves with the new pieces and the new scheme, look out. This is a team that, have you ever seen Happy Gilmore?
Yeah.
Classic. He's like, uh-oh, Happy learned how to putt. Like, that's how I feel about Aaron Rodgers having a defense. All these years making excuses for Brady and obviously having Belichick and a great defense on the other side seemingly every year. Aaron Rodgers never really had a great defense out there, but this defense is flying around, so it's going to be an interesting one to see. So, all right, well, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to look over this Packers team a little bit more thoroughly going forward. Then we'll be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and now we are looking into how the Broncos can best attack the Packers. Obviously, new scheme, etc. So we're not really sure about exactly what they're going to be. We kind of have an idea of what LaFleur wants to run, but again, there's going to be some differences there. So the big thing for me with the Denver Broncos so far, we're having some issues with the pass rush to start the season, at least as far as statistical output. And that's I wrote an article today. I think it was like 6,000 words. My goodness. Sorry, Chad. But that's a big thing. But for me, the pass rush needs to be more about the containment in this game. Aaron Rodgers, he'll take what the defense gives you, but when he kills you is when those broken plays happen and he gets outside. So the Broncos really need to be disciplined. And if Aaron Rodgers nickels and dimes them down the field and makes throw after throw after throw, then damn it, tip of the cap, he's one of the best ever for a reason. But the Broncos cannot afford to give up giant chunk plays, and that is when he gets out of the pocket, out of structure, and throws those bombs. So got to keep him contained and just really bracket him in the pocket if you can. He still might beat you, but he's going to have to earn it. Another big thing the Broncos have struggled with the first 2 weeks, and the Packers running the ball better. I mean, Aaron Jones has had a pretty good first 2 games of the season. He's on my fantasy team, so a little conflicted there. But the Broncos have not done a good job of keeping the opponents at 3rd and long. And this is really harming how the Broncos can attack the opposing team in the pass. So really got to do better at creating 3rd and longs. And that hopefully Davis is going to play. It sounds like he's trending that way. That would be a big get. But big tackling, or better tackling in the open field. Yadam has struggled with that a little bit. Josie Jewell has been a little close in some of those areas. Thought it was better this week against the Bears than the Raiders, but still, big thing. The tackling in the open field is really big when you're running these zone concepts, obviously. And generating pass rush, I want to see more stunts and twists. Obviously, you can't really do that if you're at 3rd and 2 constantly because it leaves you more vulnerable to some of those gaps up the middle. But with those 3rd and longs, bring in the stunts and twist. Fangio's not a guy who brings pressure so much. He wants to create it organically with 4 guys. But with the stunts and twist, you can kind of help loosen some guys up there. So that's something I think will be big. And it'll also help the Broncos attack the middle of the Packers' offensive line, which, Billy Turner's there. They have some other guys, Ryan Lindsey, but not compared to the Packers tackles, which might be one of the best tackle duos in football with David Bakhtiari and Brian Bulaga. You got to figure out ways to free up Vaughn and Chubb. I do want Chris Harris Jr. to shadow Adams if possible. We did see him shadowing Allen Robinson last week. That speaks to Chris Harris as much as it does Isaac Yiadom. But looking at the Packers roster, Valdez-Scantling is solid. They have some weapons, but Devontae Adams is the straw that stirs the drink, so to speak. And a big takeaway watching the Bears game to the Vikings game, Packers are starting to implement this system, and the big thing with this system is the play action. So got to watch for that. Denver's struggled. The back 7 specifically has struggled against play action, and the Packers called play action on 32% of dropbacks against Minnesota. So it's starting to be implemented in the scheme, and once that gets going, this Packers team is going to be tough to beat. So got to really watch out for the play action and stay disciplined. So Eric, covering the offense now, I've been blabbering for a minute, but really this, obviously Aaron Rodgers' new system, it's fun to talk about, but I'm really intrigued. How are you going to attack this Packers defense? Because they're as good as I can remember in a while.
Well, watching over the Packers game, their first 2 games against the Bears and the Vikings, one thing that I saw them bite on a little bit is play action. And this is a common thread with every single team. Teams struggled against play actions. It's simple. You have to be cautious of the run, but you also have to be cautious of the pass. So you see people bite and then they try to recover. But one thing with the Packers, though, that makes it a little bit harder than most other teams is that their corners, if they bite, their safeties, if they bite, they have a little bit better recovery ability than we see with some other teams. So there's some cushion there for them biting. But where you want to attack at off of play action is the middle of the field. Blake Martinez is a very solid linebacker, but he's not great by any means, and he definitely has his struggles in pass coverage. He's much better against the run. He's very Josie Jewell-like from last year, just without as many issues with those rookie issues, so to speak. So you gotta use play action, and Denver has, I don't know the actual percentage or anything like that, but from my watch of this Broncos offense, they've ran very little play action, which is something that's supposed to be a huge part of this offense. So where is it?
It's been frustrating.
Yes, it is very frustrating. And we've seen other teams like the Bears and the Vikings against the Packers who have helped their run game going off of play action. Bears, not quite as much as the Vikings because they got away from the run so early, and Trubisky ended up throwing it like 50 some odd times or something like that, 40 some odd, and they only ran it like 17 total times, or I don't know the numbers right off the top of my head, but it was a very low number. But when they did use play action, it worked, even though they didn't have a run game, and that is because you don't have to have a run game in order to have an effective play action game. Denver needs to use that. They need to use that to try to help their run game. Another thing is you got to watch those. You got to watch those pass rushers, Preston Smith, Adarius Smith, and even Kenny Clark on the interior. You have to be cautious of them because they can disrupt a game. And with the issues that the Broncos have had at their offensive tackles, then with Garrett Bowles, he's got to be able to hold his own and do it so without holding. One way that they got to help him out is possibly keep a tight end in line and chip those guys. Leak them out after they chip them. Help give Bowles the advantage early on. And the same thing with Elijah Wilkinson. Everybody's talking about how great he played against Oakland. I think he struggled quite a bit. Then against the Bears, he struggled even more when it came to pass protection, which understandable against the pass rushers he was facing against, but it was a very rough game. He looked definitely better in the run game. So you want to provide help for them, and you got to figure out how to handle Kenny Clark up the middle. It's going to be a true test with Dalton Reisner and Connor McGovern, two guys that are definitely, basically, one's a rookie and one's new to the position, basically. And Akeem Hicks kind of gave them some issues last week, so we got to see them step up against Kenny Clark. And then their linebackers, I hinted on it with the play action. They're without Oren Burks, who is a solid guy. They lost Green, who is their safety linebacker hybrid. B.J. Goodson has been a liability for them. And Blake Martinez, he's very limited, and this is one area where Denver should definitely focus at getting Fant on Blake Martinez in coverage, because Fant is a really great athlete and could definitely take advantage of Blake Martinez being a limited athlete. So
it'd be nice to get some explosive pass plays down the field.
Yeah, definitely. I am going to be, which leads into being cautious with the secondary. As much as I want to see them take shots downfield, we have to be very careful with it, because they have some threats at safety. They have some threats at cornerback. They have Kevin King, who is pretty close to that shutdown corner status. He's only given up 3 catches, only been targeted 7 times, and has 1 interception. Those are, for 2 weeks in, those are very shutdown corner-like numbers. And Adrian Amos, King, and their other safety, Darnell Savage, if you take shots deep and you are not basically perfect on it, they're going to make you pay.
And you didn't even list my favorite guy in the secondary.
And then you have Jair Alexander.
My guy. Floor is yours. I love him.
I was saving him for last because he out of all the corners and everybody in the secondary, he's the one that worries me the most. He has had his struggles this year, but if he is on fire, he is on fire. And this year he's been targeted 16 times. 16! And only gave up 6 catches. He's sticky. Yeah. I can't remember the actual number, but out of everybody on the Packers secondary, and basically in the NFL, he's one of the only corners that gives up less than a yard of separation consistently.
He really reminds me of a young Chris Harris Jr.
Yes.
He's just so like fluid and twitched up and technically savvy and just a pest. I don't know. He was my favorite corner coming out of that class, and Packers did good getting him. I was a big fan.
I absolutely loved him as well, and Packers being my second favorite team, I'm really happy they got him because I want to see the Packers be successful. But with them playing Denver, it's just makes me worry because he's so good at contesting the catch points. He's so sticky. He sticks with you, sticks with the receivers, and it's scary to having to deal with the secondary added in with that pass rush. Denver's definitely going to have to focus again on those linebackers and do something to help them out. Otherwise, this game can get out of hand real quick.
And I do like the depth and variety of the front as well. I mean, we've hardly touched on Rashawn Gary, but he's a physical freak. I mean, worst case, you just have him attack a gap and he's going to push you. But
he struggled
a bit, yeah.
He's struggling a lot this year. And I can't remember the exact number, but he's barely played too.
Yeah. And I feel like they're really he's not an outside linebacker to me.
No, they're definitely not using him the best way for him. And then talking about another one is you have to watch out for Monty Adams too.
Oh, yes, Montravius Adams. big boy. I remember him coming out from Auburn.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to me that he's not the nose tackle, but yeah, they got some good players up there. I feel like the secondary depth is not amazing. Once you get past those two corners, I mean, Tremont Williams is ancient, and Tony Brown is a college free agent for a reason, and Josh Jackson from Iowa has not stepped up for them yet. So really, if you can get them into 3 cornerback sets, you got to pick on that third cornerback. I think it's what it comes down to. And the linebackers, of course.
Yep. And just for the record, Rashawn Gary has only played 24 total snaps, with 20 of them being on defense.
So he's making an impact on special teams. 4 snaps.
So it's definitely rough to watch, and just I get why they selected him, but I'm very curious as to how they're using him. And I got to mention the unforgotten man on that defensive line, because he's another one who he can wreak all kinds of havoc on a defense or on an offensive line, and that's Dean Lowry. I really love watching him play, and he's not great by any means, but he can make an offensive line pay if they don't give him the respect he deserves.
I just can't like him because he's a Northwestern guy, and Northwestern always somehow manages to beat the Hawks. So
everybody should manage to beat the Hawks.
Watch your tongue, Mr. Alaska, University of Alaska, or whatever the heck you cheer for. No team. You're unbiased for that reason.
I actually don't even know what the University of Alaska is. I know we have one. Seawolves? I think it's the Seawolves, actually.
Let's go Seawolves. I'll pull for them. Probably a great hockey team. Not to assume too much.
Well, I think they only have a hockey team and a baseball team. Oh, they have like women's volleyball too, but
not like basketball or indoor or anything.
I don't think so. I may be completely mistaken on this, but I really don't think so.
Interesting. Alrighty. Well, back to the Broncos. Key matchups to watch. Obviously, we've covered the Packers here, some of the things that you want to do to attack them, but now we got to kind of bring it back to the Broncos. So, Eric, I'll kick it off to you. The key matchups, areas that you are really excited about this week as far as who the Broncos are going up and how they match up.
Well, the one I actually hinted on quite a bit earlier was getting Fant against Blake Martinez. That's one matchup I really want to watch, and I want to watch the Broncos exploit that, because you have an athlete against not so much of an athlete. And I'll be very curious if the Packers decide to try to give help to whoever it is that's guarding Fant, whatever linebacker or safety, just to try to help take him out of the play. Cortland Sutton versus Kevin King. I'm actually really intrigued by this, because this is a matchup of a emerging stud receiver in Sutton who looks so much better with his routes than he did a year ago. Definitely put the time in to improve that. And then Kevin King, who's on his way to being a shutdown corner. And you actually talked about it quite a bit, about the pass rushers of the Broncos, Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. Another matchup I'm watching is how they are able to get after the quarterback with David Bakhtiari and the beluga whale, Brian Bulaga. It's definitely something that the Broncos have to figure out. Stunts and twists, that's something that's going to be helping them. But one reason why I'm watching this too is because Aaron Rodgers, like almost every single year, averages holding the ball for over 3 seconds. That is the best way to let your pass rushers go. If they can keep them in third and long situations and force them to hold the ball and keep them in the pocket, this defense might actually be able to force some takeaways. So that's one reason why this is out of all of them, this is the one matchup that is the biggest one for me.
Yeah, it's not easy for the Broncos edge rushers to get on the stat sheet, but I do think they're going to be able to get one. The big thing, really need the offense to hold their own in this game and do enough so that the Packers don't just sit on the ball and take the air out of it, which we've seen the first 2 weeks. But it'll be interesting. Looking at this Packers injury report, Montravius Adams did not participate because of a shoulder injury. Brian Bulaga, he had a veteran rest day today. Oren Burks has a chest injury. Kenny Clark had a calf injury. Jimmy Graham has a groin injury. Sorry about that, Jimmy. Kevin King has a chest injury. Blake Martinez has a shoulder injury. Darnell Savage has a shin injury. Zadarius Smith has an ankle injury. So these are all through the Packers walkthrough today, not a full practice. So a lot of these guys will be good to go, but that's a pretty extensive injury list. I didn't even get to some of these depth guys that are listed on here. Will Redmond, Tremont Williams. So they are dinged up. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. For me, some of the matchups that I'm most excited about, Jair Alexander versus Emmanuel Sanders. We talked about Jair Alexander. I really like cornerbacks who talk. You know, like sometimes they're really annoying when you go against them, but as scouting them, guys who kind of bring that fire that'll let you know when they make a play. And Jair Alexander's that guy, you know, he's a dog. He will bark at you, but Emmanuel Sanders is a dog too. So I'm really curious to see how these two go at each other. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of jawing back and forth. Maybe it gets a little physical as far as some extracurricular activity close to the end of the whistle, you know, that kind of thing. But how those two guys go up against each other, they're just totally the perfect types to go against each other. You know, that's how the Packers, I'm assuming, will match up against them. And then, obviously, Garrett Bowles coming off one of the worst starts of his careers. Granted, the Bears' front seven is probably the best in the league. But, man, this Packers one is, you know, a tier under them, but really good. And both these Smiths, Packers typically have not spent money in recent years, but they spent money on these edge rushers. And it's made a difference for them. I mean, it's made their defense, it's completely revolutionized it. So both Za'Darius Smith, who scares me tremendously against Garrett Bowles if they line him up over there, because he's such a power player. I mean, last year for the Ravens, he was, I think, one of the highest pressure rates of any defensive edge player in football last year. Kind of under the radar, third-round pick from Kentucky, I believe. But, man, he is a fun player. And then Preston Smith, really good player, opposite Ryan Kerrigan for a number of years from Mississippi State, second-round pick. So both those guys going up against Bowles, also Wilkinson, but Bowles is the one I'm looking for to have a bounce-back game, hopefully. But, man, it's rough. And then a guy that I'm really excited to highlight in this game is going to be Kenny Clark, defensive tackle, first-round pick, one of the youngest players to come out in the past few years out of UCLA. Man, he has evolved into just an absolute tank at the nose tackle position. I absolutely love his game. So strong, so quick. I mean, such great pad level. He can two gap, he can one gap. What a great player. And McGovern played pretty good the first two games of the season. You know, no missed snaps, holding up pretty well. A little bit of leakage sometimes up the gut, but, you know, that's to be expected sometimes. New scheme, new guys around him. But, man, Kenny Clark, that's a rough one. I don't know if it's as tough as kind of the combination of Hicks and Goldman, but as a singular player, Kenny Clark is probably one of the most underrated interior defensive linemen in football today. So, moving it right along here, superlatives. I'll just throw these out to you, Eric, and you just give them back to me. The Broncos win if
they score more points. No, if
they're okay, Madden. You sound like Madden.
The Broncos win if that defense is able to contain Aaron Rodgers, keep him in the pocket, and force mistakes, and give their offense extra opportunities.
The Broncos lose if
they don't do that. It is basically just if they don't do that. If they let Aaron Rodgers make plays all over the field, if they let him just drive down, if they don't force mistakes from him, they're going to lose, because this is an offense that isn't going to be able to keep up with Aaron Rodgers if he gets going.
Okay, I'm about it. I think the big thing for me is Aaron Jones needs to be a non-factor, because I think if they're getting those constant big runs and those gashing kind of things, controlling the clock, that's what we've seen these past couple weeks, and it's hurt them. So I really am looking for them to limit Aaron Jones, just to my own detriment, because I have him on one of my big fantasy leagues. So MVP, if the Broncos win, will be?
I think you'd have to say either probably at one of those pass rushers or Garrett Bowles, because if the Broncos are winning this game, that means most likely Garrett Bowles was able to at least hold his own as an offensive tackle. And after the game we saw, we're not sure if he can do that. So I think if he definitely is able to, then that could be the case. And if they force mistakes on the defense, then it would be largely in part because the pass rushers are harassing Aaron Rodgers. So can't pick just one, but it'd definitely be one of those three options.
Guy I've been impressed with the first two games. I think he might get it rolling here. Royce Freeman. I think they're going to feed him a little bit. Saying the Packers, their pass defense has been great. The rush defense has been good, not great. So I'm going to call it. The GOAT, if the Broncos lose, will be. And that's not greatest of all time. That's the old school definition of GOAT.
I think it'd be the offensive line. As much as we focus on the defense and stopping Aaron Rodgers, it comes down to the fact that the Broncos offense needs to get going. If this offensive line doesn't step up their game, because these first 2 weeks it has been nothing but struggles for them. No run game's not able to get going. Passing game, they're just constantly giving up pressure. At one point against the Bears, Joe Flacco had like 19 dropbacks and like 27 pressures. I can't remember the exact number, but he was pressured more than he had actually dropped back to pass. So they got to stop that. They got to give him time. And if this defense isn't able to stop Aaron Rodgers, then they're going to need to be taking shots downfield, which makes the protection all that more important.
Yeah, I definitely hear you there. And for me, man, this is a hard one. I'm going to go with again, I said the key is stopping Aaron Jones, making him nothing. I'm going to go with the interior defensive line, mainly Shelby Harris. I mean, where's he been? I've been a big fan of his game, but maybe he's totally miscast in this game. Very possible, but I'm looking for you, Shelby. Where you at? We need you to step up, make a play, earn that money, man. It's a contract year for you, free agency this upcoming season. So, all right, key stat for the game.
Turnovers.
Turnovers.
Turnovers are time of possession. The Broncos have been struggling to get their defense off the field, and we haven't seen a turnover yet. Giving the offense more opportunities, I'm definitely leaning with turnovers, but time of possession is right up there with it too.
I'm going to lean into this piece I wrote today. I got all my research done, so it's fresh in my mind, but I'm going to go average yards to gain for the Packers on third down. Against the Raiders, the Raiders averaged about 4.1 yards per third down, and that includes some 3rd and 10s, 3rd and 8s. And against the Bears, if you take out the 3rd and 29, which was a holding, then a negative penalty, it was only about 5.1. So I want to see the Broncos get that number up to at least 6.5 or 7 and do much better at creating 3rd and longs to help this pass rush really just start to take over. So player who must step up if the Broncos are to win. I'll go first for this one. I think Flacco's got a ball out. I mean, don't want to put it on the quarterback. He's been playing well so far, but I need to see him take another step. And obviously he's not going to outduel Aaron Rodgers, but I need him to outduel Aaron Rodgers. So I'm going to go with Flacco. Hopefully he's going to be the steadying force. A lot of people have talked about him, how great he's been, even in this losing streak. The even keelness. If everybody's not panicking, this is going to happen sometimes in the NFL. So Flacco, got to be the guy that steps up for me.
For me, I'm going to go with two of them. I'm going to go with Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson. We've seen Justin Simmons. He's been out of position a lot in these first two games. We've got to see that get fixed, especially against Aaron Rodgers. And Kareem Jackson, he's gotten close to a couple potential takeaways and just wasn't able to finish. He's given up some, not big plays, but he's given up some plays. I'd like to see him step up and just finally get over that hunch and just make that big takeaway to really ignite the defense as a unit. And then back to Justin Simmons, just get in position. Stay in position. Don't over pursue. Don't get lost in your coverage. Do your job, because you make mistakes like that. I mean, there was a big one, well, two big ones against the Bears where one of them he was able to recover, thankfully, and be able to break up the pass, and the other one was overthrown. Aaron Rodgers isn't going to place that ball too far ahead of him, and the other one he's going to place it up just far enough where Justin Simmons can't catch up to him because the receiver won't have to slow down. Got to get in position, needs to step up there.
And my dark horse difference maker, I'm going to go with Jeff Hireman. I think that the Broncos, they haven't been the best at the edges in the first two games, the tight ends, blockings, and that falls on Hireman. I wasn't expecting Fant to be a great blocker this season. He kind of hinted that he might have some potential there in preseason, but he struggled a bit the first 2 weeks from what I've seen. So dark horse, I'm going very dark horse, lights off level of dark horse. But Jeff Hireman, if he can get in there, make some big plays, help Garrett Bowles chip a little bit, and maybe make a few plays where he extends the drive. I mean, we saw it last week. He was just so close to making some first downs. You got to make one more guy miss or, just fall forward. He can do that. So I'm going to go with Hireman as the dark horse.
I'm going to go with defense, and this is one that a lot of people aren't realizing. His not being on the field has been a big issue for this Broncos defense. That's Todd Davis. It's looking like he's going to be playing in this game, and if he does, he's my dark horse difference maker. I think it's going to be a huge boost for this Broncos defense, especially against their running game, because he is such a good run defender. I think that he will help force them into longer situations on third down, and he will definitely be a tremendous upgrade over Corey Nelson in coverage.
I cannot disagree with you there. Corey Nelson has been dreadful. That's the only word I can use to keep it PG on here still. But man, he has, just watching him, it's just like, oh my God, who is the 56 running around? Like disgracing Al Wilson's number. It's been bad. So, all right, a little bit of new section here. I put it in today, kind of setting some fun numbers. I'll just rapid fire them at you, and you tell me over, under, or push if you want to be lame. But the turnover margin in this game, Over, under, 0 for the Broncos.
Over.
So you think that they win the turnover battle?
I think they do.
Okay. Broncos sacks, 1.5.
Over. Aaron Rodgers has a tendency to give up multiple sacks in the game, and I think that Bradley Chubb and Von Miller both walk away with at least one.
Alrighty. Broncos third down conversion success percentage, 33. Under 33. Yeah. All right. Red zone touchdown success rate, 33%.
They've shown.
So that means when they get into the 20, 25-yard area.
Whenever they've gotten there, they haven't shown the ability to punch it in. I'm going under on this. I don't think that that's going to be able to get fixed in such a dramatic fashion in a week.
Alrighty. Well, I was feeling good with you until those last two. So Flacco touchdowns, 1.5.
I'm going to go over on this one. I think he manages to snag 2 in this one.
Alrighty. Rushing yards, 125.
Under. Unless his offensive line really steps up, I'm not seeing this Broncos offense get more than 100 yards on the ground.
Alrighty. Rodgers passing yards, 300.
I'm going to go... I'm going to be lame, and I'm going to go push on this one.
Oh, exactly
I can see if the defense really steps up and harasses them, I could see them going under. But if not, I can see him going for 400 plus against this defense. So it's hard. I can't pick which one.
Alrighty. Rushing yards. I put a number here that's way too high. I'm going to change it. Exactly 100.
I'm going to go under. I think getting Todd Davis back is really going to help this Broncos defense. I think it'll be close to 100, but I think they managed to keep him under.
Alrighty. Well, I'll save these next two for you just because the line last I saw was 8.5 favoring the Packers, but it's time for their prediction, so we can kind of take it from the prediction there. So, Eric, what's the final score going to be on Sunday?
I think the Broncos end up losing in basically a last-second touchdown by Aaron Rodgers, 24-17, Packers over the Broncos.
Man, talk about disheartening. I have the Broncos getting beat 24-13, and my bold prediction is I think the Broncos are going to maybe start to panic a little bit in this one, and they end up losing the turnover battle by 3. So really just start to cough up the ball. So it's a bold prediction for a reason, folks. Alrighty, well, that's going to end the Scout's Eye preview segment of the Building the Broncos podcast. I want to thank Eric for coming on and filling for Carl in short notice, but you guys don't want to go anywhere. We got a special guest coming up next. The Athletics' Brandon Thorn, and just an absolute offensive line mastermind. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and up next, my interview with Brandon Thorn. Enjoy. And now I am excited to welcome in Brandon Thorn to the podcast, writing for The Athletic. And Brandon, what else are you up to these days? I know you are a very busy guy.
Yeah, so I host the Trench Warfare podcast. I try to get one of those out a week, sometimes more. So that's between those two things. And also I write for EstablishTheRun.com. I do a weekly matchup article for them, trying to predict offensive line pressure, and then also when offensive lines have the upper hand and aren't going to be giving up too much pressure. So I really focus on the lines for them. And yeah, that's pretty much it right now.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on here. You're really busy. Been trying to get you on here now for a couple of weeks, it seems, talk about this offensive line. So really appreciate you carving out the time to come on here and just talk a little bit of offensive line as it pertains to the Denver Broncos. And just kicking things off, you just had an article came out today on The Athletic, which I'm a subscriber. If you guys aren't a subscriber to The Athletic, I highly recommend it. Brandon is one of the many guys on there that's doing fantastic work, probably one of my favorite sports subscriptions out there. I mean, it's well worth it. But the guy that's on everybody's mind, everybody's tongue, everybody has an opinion, Garrett Bowles, struggling to start off the season, and he obviously flashes some promise. There was some good in that game against the Bears, but the thing is, at least as far as I'm concerned with the offensive line, consistency is probably as important as any singular trait, because when you're not consistent, you get these penalties and things can snowball like they did on Sunday for the Broncos and Garrett Bowles. So your thoughts on Garrett Bowles coming out of the first 2 weeks of the season, and whether or not, what's the direction for him from here?
Yeah, so definitely I would recommend everybody read that piece if you do have The Athletic, because I went pretty in depth on it. But as far as, the outlook for Bowles, I think it's at a point now where it's kind of make or break time for him as far as correcting mistakes that he's been making since he's been a rookie, and even in college to a lesser degree, because the competition didn't put as much stress on him, obviously playing at Utah. And he only has 13 games of Division I to his college resume as well, and that was kind of a concern coming out. But yeah, at this point, I think really it's his hand usage is really, really inconsistent, and he tends to get really wide with his hands at contact. And the thing that's probably most concerning aside from that is once he does establish his initial position on guys, he really doesn't seem to have any awareness that he's too far wide and that he's going to be called for a holding. And he actually just doubles down a lot of the time and just hangs on in that position, and it looks really bad and it's ugly. And it's just concerning that he hasn't fixed it yet. And the worst part is, his reactions after the fact, he can't believe that it's holding. And then the stuff that he said in the media as well, it just seems like there's a little bit of a lack of accountability there. And I think that's really the most concerning thing in all of it. But yeah, at this point, the Broncos don't really have another option to go to. So they're kind of stuck with Bowles for now, at least, until Juwan James comes back. I don't know if they'll want to move Wilkinson over there, or I saw somebody even asked Coach Fangio if they would move Risner over there, or Reisner. I don't know. I don't really love any of those options, honestly. But yeah, it's just the fact that it's approached and talked about is a really bad sign. And I think it's up to Bowles at this point. It's up to him to fix it.
Yeah, at some point you got to question the player themselves. They've signed Leary, put him next to him, and Leary is a vet, and Leary was excited to get back to right guard, it seemed, after the season, after moving back to left guard the season before. And they bring in Reisner to help him out. They bring in Mike Munchak. Kugler and Strausser are no slouches themselves. So at some point, you're giving the guy every chance to succeed. He's got to take it. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's just, the thing about it is offensive tackle right now, offensive line in general, there's not a lot of really high quality offensive lines out there, but I think it gets worse when you're talking about tackles, just because that's the position that requires obviously the most physical talent on top of skill, and there's just not a lot of those people around, honestly. So yeah, that's, I think, really a big reason why he is still there, is because it's kind of hard to replace tackles in the NFL today. And at this point in the season, being so early and Munchak just getting there, it makes sense to keep him in there and just, do what you can at this point, because there's no other options. But yeah, it sucks to see. It's early though, and there's still, obviously 14 games left. So he has time to correct it. But I think veterans on the team are getting frustrated based on what I've seen, like Emmanuel Sanders and team captains, team leadership. Everybody just seems to be over it. So, yeah, it's up to him now, like I said. And the thing that's most frustrating for me is that, he's always had these tools. That's the reason he went in the first round. I saw in your piece you graded him in the second round. The upside is there to be a solid player, but it's just the same thing over and over again, right? Like, he looks like the same player he did his rookie year, to me at least, that he does now. It's the same mistakes. It's the same issues with the drops, the hands. It's, at some point, it's like, is it going to click? It might never. Yeah, he's 27 years old, and he's only in his third year, so time is not on his side. And yeah, I would be surprised at this point if he does just all of a sudden become a good player or even a solid player. So we'll see. But, it just obviously doesn't look like it's promising. Indeed. Well, talking about promising, the guy next to him, Dalton Risner. I know that we talked a little bit before we started this off that you hadn't done as much in-depth work for the week 2 with the other offensive linemen, getting that Bulls piece out there. Risner, from what I saw, had an up-and-down game week 2, but he's going against a top 5 interior defensive lineman in the game in Akeem Hicks. That's going to happen. Rookie's going to take some lumps in that regard, but overall, pretty solid. So I'm curious about your early thoughts on Dalton Risner on the Denver Broncos offensive line.
Yeah, so the week 1 game against Oakland, that was a really impressive first start for a rookie. He came out there and looked really comfortable in pretty much everything he did, specifically pass protection. Granted, Oakland's pass rushers are not good. Just across the board, I mean, they don't have a good pass rushing defensive unit. But that said, still, it was a really impressive performance by him. I thought he looked calm and collected as a pass protector, didn't really panic ever. And I think part of that is because he has really good play strength and he has a good anchor. So he feels like he has a way to win as a pass protector, and you could see him rely on that. And he really does a nice job of playing inside out on pass rushers and not giving up the inside very easily. So, he's a calming presence for Bulls. I mean, so I think that, that further goes to him not having any excuses at this point, because I think Risner's a solid player right now, and he's just going to get better. They moved him in the run game, which I really liked in week 1. He had a really nice pull to the right side leading up to the second level, sprung a big run by, I think it was Lindsey. But, I mean, so you get to see some of the things that, Mike Munchak does as far as capitalizing on guys' strengths, putting them in positions that they're familiar with. Risner obviously did that, pulled a lot at Kansas State. So yeah, it was a pretty good performance in week 1, and then just the little that I've seen in week 2. I mean, he struggled a little bit with Akeem Hicks and Eddie Goldman, but that's as far as sustaining and controlling on his blocks against them, which that's not a knock on him whatsoever, just because Hicks and Goldman are elite
studs,
level run
absolutely.
defenders. Yeah, so for a solid rookie, a good rookie to come in and struggle a little bit against 2 elite guys at what they do, that's totally understandable and not a concern at all. So I need to go back and watch it again more closely from his perspective, but generally he looks like an instant solid starter, and that's kind of his floor. So now I just see him getting better.
Absolutely. Well, working it across the line, Connor McGovern, there was a lot made this offseason, preseason, about his struggles at center, snapping the football. But from my eye, granted I haven't seen the All-22 yet, but from my eye, I think he's looked pretty darn good out there at the center position. Last year he was good run blocker at right guard. He had some struggles against lengthier speed rushers, kind of like Leonard Williams being an example at that position. But at center so far, I say 2 for 2 good games.
Yeah, so I haven't really even kind of glanced at him much for the week 2 performance yet. And he hasn't really jumped off the screen to me, so I need to go back and watch him there for sure. But week 1, I watched him pretty closely, had time to do that. And, I highlighted that run block he had, that reach block on the 3 technique. Granted, he had a little help with the motion, I believe, but still, that was an incredible block, one of the top 2 or 3 blocks I saw, the entire week. So that's a nice kind of notch under his belt there. But I think the thing that concerns me most about him that I saw at least once or twice in week 1 is, the mental processing side of pass protection and recognizing guys that are looping around on stunts or delayed blitzing type of linebackers, things that happen late when he's just uncovered in pass protection. I think he's a little late to recognize those things, and he allows some leakage in that A gap. So that's really, I think, the thing that when I watch him over the last year and a half, that's the thing that continually pops up. And then, like you mentioned, I think when he goes against physical freaks on the inside who have 34, 35-inch arms, that they can get into his chest a little bit, but that's kind of natural. He should be able to overcome that to an extent with time, as he gets better with his hands. But I really like his play strength and his anchor. I think that's kind of how he, that's how he earns his spot out there is he's really stout, especially in the run game. And he brings a physical presence that I think you love to see. And that's the thing about this offensive line just in general that I'm most encouraged about is like all these guys are really physically imposing people and players the way they play the game. Garrett Bowles has that, even though it's reckless right now. But Reisner, McGovern, Leary, and Wilkinson right now all play that way. So, just kind of a general thought there, but I'm really encouraged by that.
So just general processing, looking for those stunts, maybe even some delayed blitzers up the A gap. That makes sense. And, he's the guy that's probably set to hit free agency on this class. Is that the main thing you're looking for, whether or not he can improve there, if he's a guy you're looking to retain? Or is he showing enough? And, I hear good things about him as a worker in the weight room that, you're going to bet on that youth and upside with a guy like Munchak.
Yeah, I think, that makes sense to me. I think when you have a guy like Munchak there, you can definitely get value in places other people can't. And I think McGovern would be that. I don't think he would be particularly expensive to retain. It makes sense to me. Just let him grow there.
Yeah, and something to be said for the chemistry on the inside as well, especially for a team that's implementing more zone concepts. So moving it right along here, right guard back, number 65, Ronald Leary. He's been flagged for some penalties early on, maybe a little bit of rust out there, but for the most part, playing pretty solid and good to see him out there. And not only, the leadership, definitely, I was going to say not only the play aspect, but from what I've heard, he's definitely the leader of that team, helping those guys, film room, work ethic. He's been there, done that. So thoughts on Ronald Leary, what you've seen early on this season?
Yeah, especially with James out of the lineup, he's really, the veteran there. He is anyway, but I think it's a little pronounced at this point without James. And yeah, again, I think when you watch Leary going back to his time with Dallas, that 2016 season, it's the same things that he brings now that he did then, and really competitive toughness, physicality. He has pretty good power, and he's smart. And he doesn't make a lot of bad decisions. I think that's what I've seen from him, and it's really good to see. You mentioned some of the holding penalties. I think at least one of those is really questionable, but he does have a few. I think part of that can be chalked up to him coming off a torn Achilles at his age. Is really impressive still. That's kind of just important context to consider in his performance through 2 weeks is coming back from such a devastating injury like that. But all things considered, I think he's really solid so far, and he's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun to see the old guy out there. Hopefully he doesn't listen. I don't think he'd appreciate being called the old guy. Nah, not that old. But comparatively. And then a guy who's really impressed me through, not as much the game against Oakland, but I thought he took a step forward this week, and he's flashing some tools as current right tackle, Elijah Wilkinson, undrafted guy, and Rick Scangarello really, but praised him in the offseason, and I think there's something there. And really excited about the ball of clay, the youth, and let's be honest, as a team building aspect, the cost controlled aspect of Elijah Wilkinson going forward.
Yeah, for sure. All those things that make him a really intriguing guy to develop under Munchak and to keep there. So I think that anytime you can have a guy with his physical tools, his size, strength, power, competitive toughness, the way he approaches the game, and plays the game, I think putting that, under Munchak is just a really, really smart move and just a benefit to have. Munchak always has that guy that he's working on. He did it in Pittsburgh. He made Alejandro Villanueva a good starter from a receiver at Army. And then you look at the right tackles he made better there. He made everybody better. So I think Wilkinson, under Munchak is just going to continue to get better. Hopefully they find a spot for him. I mean, once James comes back, he is kind of out of a spot, so he'll be obviously a very important reserve at that point. Maybe some 6 OL looks, that would be cool. But he's probably going to be regulated back on the bench. But yeah, I mean, week 1, I wrote about it, posted about it, all the stuff that he showed that I thought was impressive. I haven't really said this, but I think, the thought has at least crossed my mind that, man, I mean, did you really have to give that contract to Juwan James? I mean, hindsight's 20/20, but it's just interesting because, I mean, I don't see why you couldn't just keep him there and let him grow, but obviously that's not going to happen with James in the fold, and I'm excited to see James grow under Munchak as well, but yeah, that thought did cross my mind.
So I guess just a couple more questions here before we get you on your way. When James comes back, how quick or how long is the leash before you insert somebody at left tackle if these struggles with Bulls continue? Or is it, a ride or die season and hoping that the high investment finally clicks and realizes that potential? Because, I mean, make no mistake about it, the athletic potential is there. It's just the heart and the brain.
Yeah, maybe a couple more games. I mean, and if he can't get it corrected and show an improvement in his technique and just his understanding of what he was doing wrong and the accountability factor and all that stuff. I mean, if that all just kind of does a 180, then, you could keep him in there. But I think a couple more games to give him that opportunity to do that. And after that, I mean, maybe just try Wilkinson over there, I guess. I mean, just anything would be better. I don't know if you can really maintain, the confidence of the locker room if he's playing like this and you keep him out there. I don't know. I mean, maybe, but I wouldn't really want to mess with that if I could avoid it.
For sure. And you talked about moving Wilkinson over to left tackle. Would that be the move? I've seen talks about Reisner. I've seen talks about starting Jake Rodgers, which missed me with that. And I've seen maybe some talks about kicking James over to right tackle. Personally, though, I think you avoid the weakening so many spots by just moving Wilkinson over to left tackle.
Yeah, I mean, that was my first thought. And second, I guess you could try James over there and put Wilkinson at right, but that would probably need to be a long-term, solution or a long-term decision there. You don't want to move James there for the rest of the year and then move him back, I wouldn't think. So that one's a little more tricky. So I would just start with trying Wilkinson over there. I think that does it breaks up things the least amount to the front, and I think that's important.
Yep, I definitely agree with you there. And final question for me, I just want you to put something to bed for me. It's a common, I guess the word I'd use would be misconception going around Broncos country right now that we've seen enough of Garrett Bowles at tackle. Maybe I can get behind that. But the solution is to move him to guard. He's nasty. He is, he blocks really hard in the run game. But there are technical reasons why, to me at least, this is something that seems very unlikely. So can you just kind of expand upon that? I mean, we've talked about this before, but why is the reason that, it's not so simple? The failed tackle going to guard is not so much about, that guy can't hang at tackle, so you just try him at guard. There's specific skills that a guard needs. It's different than a tackle, and that would just amplify issues with Bowles.
Yeah, I mean, blocking hard in the run game and being nasty are nice things after you get leverage on a defender. And in order to do that, your hands have to be in the proper position and used the right way as far as the timing of them, the placement of them, and then being able to refit or reset your hands when they get knocked away. So I think, with his hands being as bad as they are, putting him inside will only exacerbate that issue because the speed at which he's going to see contact just rises. When you get closer to the ball, obviously guys are aligned closer to you, so your margin for error with your hand usage is much smaller, especially, obviously in pass protection, but as a run blocker as well. I think he would get kind of tossed around inside by guys like Akeem Hicks, and he wouldn't stand a chance against any of those type of guys. So yeah, I just don't see that one going well at all. I think he has to be the left tackle, or he might be out of here at some point soon.
Yeah, nope, I agree with you 100%. Honestly, I'd try him at tight end before I try him at guard. Jake Fisher, him. That's just last resort. But I'm moving him to guard. Don't think it's happening, folks. So, all right. Well, thank you very much for coming on here. Is there anything you want to promote before you get on out of here?
No. Everything that I do with The Athletic and Establish the Run, and you could just follow me at Twitter or on Twitter at Brandon Thorn NFL. And yeah, I think that's about it. My podcast is Trench Warfare.
Awesome, and I'm a listener to that and a reader of your work, and really appreciate you taking the time to come on here. Hopefully, we'll get you on again, whether that be to recap the Broncos offensive line, some of the issues or ups and downs there, and entering the draft season. Maybe you can talk about some offensive linemen there. As an Iowa Hawkeye fan, I'm always about that offensive line and talking prospects there.
Yep, absolutely. I'm excited to talk about worse, that's for sure. So we'll have to get back and do that.
And that will end today's episode of Building the Broncos podcast, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Eric on Twitter at Erick Trickel and myself at Kendell MHH. Make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. Also, make sure you head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a comment, as we just really appreciate you guys helping us bring this to you and getting the word out there. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Eric and Brandon, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.